I think it's just going to get weirder and weirder and weirder, and finally it's going to be so weird that people are going to have to talk about how weird it is. Eventually people are going to say, what the hell is going on? It's not enough to say it's nuts. You have to explain why it's so nuts. The invention of artificial life, the cloning of human beings, possible contact with extraterrestrials, the systems which are in place to keep the world sane are utterly inadequate to the forces that have been unleashed.
Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guest is Ryan Christian. First, a couple of announcements. Be sure to rent or purchase Doors of Perception right now from our website. It will soon be available on streaming platforms as well. By renting or purchasing, it helps with our fundraiser so that we can get out and travel to as many locations as possible for filming of Doors of Perception Part 2. We're also booking guests for June. If you have suggestions or you'd like to be a guest, email me forbiddenknowledgenews@gmail.com. Today I want to welcome back to the show Ryan Christian. He has a passion for the truth. He understands that Americans want their news to be transparent, devoid of the opulence frothed out by today's corporate media, and he is an avid writer, editor, and truth seeker. Ryan, welcome back. How you doing?
Good, brother. Good to be back on. How are you?
Excellent. It's great to have you. I'm really looking forward to getting your insights into the hidden layers under the agendas being rolled out right now. I personally have never taken part in the illusionary political system. I've really never been emotionally attached to any collective, quote-unquote, social issues based on ideological delusions that those in power push on society. And it seems that a middle path perspective is brutally under attack by both sides of the political spectrum right now. It's pretty insane. The country is more divided than ever, and while they're all fighting with each other, the biggest technocratic takeover of the United States and beyond is taking place as we speak. So there's a lot to get to in the time we have. Before we do, it's been a little while since you've been on. Remind the audience just a little bit about yourself and let them know where they can find your work.
Yeah, just Ryan Christian, The Last American Vagabond. And as usual, just the website itself, thelastamericanvagabond.com is the best place to go to get, kind of the hub for all of our work. And even, the work that our individual writers and interviewers do on the website, whether Whitney Webb or Derek Brose or Matt Arrett or Daryl Hudak or Robert Inlakesh, and also links to their individual platforms, which I try to promote as well.
Excellent.
So thelastamericanvagabond.com is the best place to go.
On. So we haven't spoken in over a year. Lots of events are unfolding. How do you feel about where we are right now as a society with the administration and layers of hidden agendas, like I was saying in my intro? How do you feel about everything?
I mean, it's like pretty much as you're kind of laying out, is I'm very concerned, more than I have been in a long time, about how clear look, to make it very simple, some of the long-term, and let me put it this way first, whether or not you believe these things are really happening or not, or whether these are, wild conspiracy theories, what's interesting to me, and we can go over some of the things that I can literally prove, as I'm sure you're aware of, that are happening, but what seems to have been the largest kind of vein of people that were within the partisanship, I want to make clear, not just, I think, honest independent media, who have been kind of talking about a lot of these things, like the North American Union or globalism or, whatever, technocracy even, and in general, those are all broad topics. There's many nuanced things within those as well. And the same point applies, that when we finally start seeing like not just like a floated comment or a piece of legislation that you worry is connected to it, but like legitimate, like on the nose textbook examples of what we've been pointing to or worried about, and digital ID, any of it. And suddenly those people, the most prominent elements in the partisanship, seem to be completely looking a different direction, pulling punches, like trying to get your attention over here while this thing's happening over here. It's very, very clear. And so to me, that is, again, whether it's even happening or not, it demonstrates that they believe something's going on here. Like there's a move happening, in my opinion. And so in the reality of it all, I mean, we can all see what's happening. And this is why I keep really stressing that I'm of the mind that, and it's not just one side of the paradigm, I think people in partisanship in general are starting to break free from the two-party illusion, the false binary. But right now, seeing as how the conservative side of this, the Republicans are in power, as it were, I see it all as just your government, quite frankly. But that you're seeing more kind of happen there, like we saw during the COVID-19 time, which is that we see them start to kind of, they're like disillusioned. They stop taking at face value what their team leaders are screaming at them, right? And so that's really starting to diminish. And I think, again, to just the conservative side, and we can talk about the Biden or even before kind of COVID-19 era, which I think is still happening, but in regard to what Trump's administration is currently doing, I mean, how do we not see this? An mRNA platform, like that alone to me was like, wow, like I can't believe they came out like immediately and rolled out the thing that they all thought they were fighting. Like to me, that was like, what? Are we all marching through the streets at this point? And then continuation from there. Also, remember that was also an AI program in and of itself. That was a great reset issue. Even the joke at a small point of them leaning into, Tesla specifically, but electric vehicles. And I think that's just an hilarious sort of, it's a very good window into how easy it is to sort of just tell someone that they should like the different thing and all. It's the I support the current thing dynamic that's not unique to left and right. It is a partisan thing, It's team sport politics. But I can go off on 100 other examples, and I'll let you kind of see where you want to go with the conversation. But there's 100 different things, or even just in regard to just RK Jr. Now doubling down twice on the MMR shot. It's things like that. It's not like I'm used to more nuance, where it would be like here we made a version of it that's better for you. And then most of us would still be like, I don't know about that. That seems like the same thing. But instead coming out and going, no, the thing I just spent my entire career telling you is like the one thing we should be fighting is now okay and safe and effective. I don't think average people, and I have to believe most people are not bad people and are really just being tricked by this, can see through that. And so I'm of the mind that the majority of people in partisanship now are at least kind of like, they still don't know what else to do. They're still choosing to lean into one side or the other because that's what they've been trained to think is all they have, but they're really uncomfortable. And I think we all sense that right now. And so does the power ship, the power structure.
It's very interesting to see the level of almost hypnosis that some folks are under. It's never been about what the people wanted. They're going to roll out with whatever the big picture agenda is, no matter what, but they've used psychological operations to steer the masses, certain directions, high impact events, these issues that really are emotionally charged, but it's all bullshit. It's all to get us riled up and steered in a certain direction so that we support the latest thing. While we're supporting that, they're rolling out something that is going to enslave society.
Typically, yeah. But I mean, I would point out that it's not always, there's, as you I'm sure know, there's plenty of events that just randomly happen that they just, we'll use that. That's perfect. Yeah. We'll use that too. We'll fold it in, never let a good crisis go to waste kind of a point, But yeah, I agree that it's if we can't see by now that power structures in general, and I want to stress that it's not always like some dark, sinister thing. I definitely think we can see that. I think that's the core problem here, and that's kind of the leading driving factor behind a lot of people like power moves in the world today. But there's a lot of people out there that just want money, that or even think they can work their way in and do good from within, and then find themselves 30 years later doing the same thing. It's like it's just the system corrupts. But I think the point is that it's clear that they will use whatever they can to achieve those agendas at hand. And to your point, I think the higher level of this is genuinely in every way, like, long-term elements. And it's not ever just one thing. There's always multifaceted plans. And to be clear, this is not just a theory or opinion. You can look through our own history. You can see, as I'm sure you know, their own outlines, the meetings that have now become public that once were secret. And you can recognize how clear it is that they kind of they channel the public always under the guise that it's for your interest or for the betterment of humanity. And again, maybe some people in there think that or lie to themselves, but we can see throughout history that's just for their power, right? It's for the rationale for the people that want to pretend they're not evil is that their power gives us better things, or that, like what Trump is doing right now, that, it's all the tariffs, which are going to hurt you directly, are all better because it'll trickle down to you in the end, or trickle-down economics to Reagan and before. It doesn't work, guys. The power never lets you get the things that they say. You're giving them power and money, and they claim that makes your life better. It's actually an argument that's really being stressed by the technocracy, the Silicon Valley kind of tech elitists like Andreessen, Thiel, Karp, all connected to Palantir, by the way, which is embedded like a tick in Trump's administration. And they're very much stressing this Machiavellian point that the ends justify the ends justify the means, as well as the fact that Andreessen said this on Rogan, that we need elitists, rather he calls them elites, right? That means they're better than you. Elitist means they think they're better than you, and that's what they really are. That they need that. Like an oligarchy is the only thing that's ever really brought happiness to people, or freedom, or peace, or security, which I flatly disagree with. But of course, that's a self-serving argument to say that we need to let the good elites win up from the bad elites. And that's just that's creating another false binary. And it's just they're moving us along to something new, to where now we can fight over which elite should rule our lives. Matt Arrett, who writes for The Last American Vagabond, has really talked about this a lot in the past, about where his mind is. This is sort of a long-term, the real ruling power structure, the bloodlines of the past that have like always really been in pulling strings, or at least strongly influencing outcomes. And we're now just going, okay, we're coming back out of the shadows. Like, it's time for us to step back out and admit that we are now, and we're seeing that. Everywhere you look right now, you're watching these string pullers sort of show themselves. And even Elon Musk, for example, whether you think that of him or not, is an oligarch. So it's rare that you see them stick themselves right in the center. It's usually they're usually the ones behind the scenes funding, dictating, influencing the people that we yell at. Now we're yelling at Elon Musk, but along with everybody else. So it just I think that's a slow step that didn't really work. So in a way, they might pull it back, but to slowly bring them back out to be the ones really running the show. That's what I think.
I want to bring to light some of the most important agendas that are unfolding right now that some folks might not be aware of. Some people that may not listen to you may just be focused on one side or the other. What would you directly tell them, things that they need to really focus on right now?
Well, I mean, it's at a time like this, when there's so much misinformation, there's so much noise. The whole game right now, more than anything, is to get you so watered down and distracted that you just, and this is the long-term ploy, more than ever today, though. It's sort of like a blend of 1984, Brave New World, like the idea being that, you just get so overwhelmed with information, and a lot of it's just benign and nonsensical and just watering it down. It's noise. So you just check out. And so you end up inadvertently deciding to choose to listen to who you think you can trust. And many of those people out there are presenting themselves that way. I'm a Christian and I believe in this, whatever it is to get them talking about the right at this point. And I'm a Christian myself, but I see a lot of these people that are, basically promoting like idol worship and like blasphemy in the mind of a Christian, and but presenting themselves as a godly person or something like that. Plenty of different ways to frame that, but just in that side right there, and that then convinces somebody that they can be trusted because, well, we share the same values. But do you? Do you know that? You know what I mean? Like we know politicians and people in power will project what they want you to see of them. That's why you get people coming out and going like, I can play the guitar and I do walks on the beach with my family. And it's like, and whether they do or not, the point is that's trying to make you normalize a person that could not be further removed from what your life is like. It's like a different species as far as I'm concerned. Like people that are, with so much money that they don't even factor in, like even more so than a person who has so much money. Think about the generational wealth. A person who has grown up, had kids, their kids have grown up and had kids at the point to where they generationally for years, century, have never even thought once about whether they have to worry about money or whether they have to worry about food or whether they have to worry, or just if they can randomly decide to get whatever they want, whenever they want, anytime. Like think about how long that can go on before you are a different kind of person. Like that's a shocking thing to think about. And that's just what we can see. There's a lot more than that. But what your question was, what we should be paying attention to, I think that comes down or focusing on, it should be principles and integrity, principles and outcome, right? Because of all of that, we need to err as hard as we can on the side of what, like right now, I'm really stressing the idea of principles, because we keep getting to these points, like with the selection process, where most people out there are going to go, I mean, that was the conversation. I mean, they're both pretty ridiculous. Now, there was clearly the partisan sides that liked each other, liked their side. But most of what people heard was like, well, yeah, Trump's not the best. She's pretty crazy, but I don't know what else to do. And so my point was err on your principles. If you think neither of them are a good choice, then don't pick either of them. Now, whether or not you can go off on the conversation about what that might do and the consequences, that's a whole nother conversation. And I can tell you why I argue that your vote doesn't even translate to the outcome. My point is erring on the side of your principles, regardless of the consequences, is, in my opinion, never a bad thing. Like the point is that we have to make sure we're leaning into what we know we believe in, what we think is right, and then looking for nothing else than the outcome. Because what we get today, and there's been studies shown on this, that more people have leaned in these days, and I think it's because of social engineering, to thinking that what the politician says is really what matters. It doesn't matter what they've been doing for years or what they, or even like the point is they just yell, we're going to accomplish this, or we're going to bring in the golden age or whatever, or Biden's thing that he said, and all the same nonsense. And ultimately all that happens is the same linear agenda that's really never stopped. And all they want to hear is what they say next. Or, well, here's why that didn't happen. Here's what we're going to do next. So if you stand back and just go, okay, how long have they been saying that? How many times in a row has it not actually come to pass? So the only thing you can actually engage with is what you can prove. They didn't do what they said. Now, that doesn't mean they didn't mean to. Who knows? Maybe they have been stopped by those evil Democrats every time. It doesn't change the reality that the way the system is built is that's how that continues to work. So we have to stop looking at it as a partisan dynamic and just holding our government as a whole accountable. Forcing them, if we still think that's the way it works, which I don't, but just kind of, it's baby steps here, forcing them to have to work together, as it were, right? Stop pretending like, if you keep acting like one side's the enemy, we're never going to solve the real problem, even if that's the case. But you stand back and force them to deal with it. All you look at is outcome. What happened? What did you promise? You know, and right now we can see, as a matter of fact, right now, just since they got elected, that's really not what's happening. They're lying to us and projecting narratives, just like Biden did, just like Obama did, and Bush and everybody else. So that's what we have to err on more than anything.
There are also some extremely dangerous things unfolding that could have impact on Americans in a relatively short period of time. These anti-Semitic laws, the Israeli elephant in the room.
Absolutely. I mean, this is it. It really, it's not about anti-Semitism,
right?
I mean, because if you understand in principle, it doesn't, even if people genuinely want it for that reason, even if that's what you see as the problem, even if that is actually the problem, it's not what that's about, because in principle, it's speech, it's ideology. So, I mean, are we actually at this point in the country where we're out now? Because this is the problem, is we don't have real conversations about this. You get people that want the censorship around the topic still pretending they support free speech, or that we're a free speech platform while you're censoring people for certain ideas. Now, you could argue you want limited speech. Just stop pretending you want something else. We can have an honest argument about that. We can have an amicable disagreement. We can present your evidence. Why should we allow the censorship of certain speech for certain reasons? Lay it out. Otherwise, stop pretending like you believe in free speech. The problem is that right now, in principle, they are simply censoring American speech because of narrative. Now, this case, it's because of a foreign government. They're not hiding that. They're making it very clear. Israel doesn't like that. Now, they're trying to conflate it with the idea of Judaism, and we can go in that rabbit hole if you want to, but I'll talk for 45 minutes about the reality that Judaism is not Zionism, and it's one of the easiest things to prove in this conversation, and that one's a political ideology that's actually bastardizing and co-opting a religion, and the other is a religion. And this is something that Orthodox Jews in the world have been increasingly screaming about. But the point is that the censorship is important to them, because this is how they suppress what we're saying about their power structures. And Israel's one of them. Israel's government, Zionism, is a massive part of the globalist technocratic agenda. I mean, they're, if not leading it, depending how you look at it. And so that's important for them to suppress that conversation. And what better to suppress ongoing genocide than to say that you simply hate Jewish people, because that's been a buzz conversation for decades. And so if people are afraid to be called racist or somehow, anything around that conversation, which it's worked for a long time, people will simply stop calling out literally what they can see in front of them. Dead children, starvation, rape, torture, like literally everything they've been screaming about Gaza. And I'm not even going to dismiss that Hamas might not be capable of that, especially since Israel funded Hamas right up until October 7th, which is easy to prove. The point is, obviously it could have happened, but where's the evidence? Every single thing they keep presenting is is showing you the opposite. And yet every single day, even from Israeli media, from Israelis, we're getting shown that they're debating on their mainstream channels about whether they're allowed to rape people in their prisons. I mean, it's dark, man. And there's a lot of people in Israel that are speaking up about that. Not the majority, unfortunately, but it's there. And so the point is, if we can't talk about that, and that's just one aspect, think about what your government, or the U.S. government's done, right? I mean, some of the worst atrocities in history, ongoing, nonstop occupation, destabilization, lies, destruction, rape and murder and torture, just like the others. You can prove that from the Iraq War. And yet we're not allowed to talk about that because suddenly, in this case, you're a racist. But now it's dovetailing with homegrown terrorism, just like Biden was rolling out. Now Trump is rolling it out even further. Now we're going to focus on the homegrown problem. But I don't want to jump into that just yet. So the anti-Semitism part is very important to this agenda. Because if you, again, back to the point, if you defend free speech and you believe the Constitution, if you believe in your rights, then you have to argue that we have the right to be anti-anything. Explain to me why I can be anti-America in this country, but I can't be anti-anything else. Israel is what we're really talking about. Because if you look at the reality of that conversation, the vast majority of people that, and I can prove this just like anybody can with a basic due diligence, the vast majority of people that they call anti-Semites are simply people that support Palestine. And they've admitted that. The ADL has literally admitted that. And so at the end of the day, now they're conflating support for a country with a hatred for a religion. And it just cascades from there. And that's why Donald Trump is now randomly sending people to foreign prisons, people who have due process, yes, even illegal aliens. It's amazing that we even have to argue this. You know what? One of the core things here is that we have lost touch with what this country represents. People that scream about this country more than anybody and wave the flag and scream about the virtues of the Constitution seem to know less about it than anybody else in this conversation. And that's not conservatives at large. That's team sport Republicans. And it bothers me. Sorry.
No, it's all good. You mentioned the homegrown terrorism agenda, how it's basically being continued under the Trump administration, but rebranded, basically. This, to me, is also one of the most dangerous things as citizens of the United States that we could be facing here, right?
Yeah, for the 5th time today. I just did a show day before yesterday, the 4th time, that he doubled down on the idea of sending Americans to a foreign prison. I mean, there is, whether illegal alien, green card holder, visa holder, American citizen, there's literally no legal justification for what they just did. In every context of sending somebody. Now, look, if you're talking about somebody who is an illegal alien who is simply being deported back to their country, we have laws for that. You don't need the Alien Enemies Act to make that happen. On top of that, to deport them back, not charging for a crime, into a prison for life is also completely out. There's no precedent for any of this. There's no U.S. law for any of this, let alone for an American citizen. And again, if we don't understand by now that constitutional rights, and especially what the 5th, the 14th, you can go off many different parts of the Constitution. Any person, it says very clearly, and you could look to, in regard to, due process or whatever, with different amendments, search and seizure, any person. The point is that there's been many Supreme Court rulings, Reno versus Flores, and even Scalia is the one that really made this point, a conservative judge that said, in particular in deportation cases, obviously, but the point is, yes, anybody present in this country has rights, has due process, most importantly. And so now we're at a point to where they're just dumping people left and right. And so just like the other conversation, in principle, it's no different than an American. And now we see him floating it now for the 5th time today. Again, doubling down on the idea and saying the word homegrown like he made that up. Same thing they call January 6ers, by the way. He's trying to make it seem like something new. And so the problem is that we're continuing this agenda of the domestic terrorism focus, just like Whitney and I and plenty of others have been saying it's going to happen. And so how long until, this is my problem, is that I think most conservatives are already very uncomfortable about this. The team sport Republicans, just like the team sport Democrats that just don't care about anything but their side, are just screaming that they're winning everything. Trump's the best and America's the greatest and we're winning all the time. And people fall for it. The sad thing is that most people are kind of like, this is wild, man. I mean, how does anybody agree with even the floated idea of sending an American citizen to a foreign prison for any reason? I don't care how the severity of the crime does not change the reality of your constitutional rights. And the idea of doing that because they're just a bad person, all that does is set the precedent. They decide the line of something that should not exist in the first place. And so that's how that works, like with free speech. They get you to hate the Nazis or whatever, even though you can hate whoever you want. The point is they then use that to make you decide that they're okay. Their rights don't matter because they're just so bad. And then that eventually comes back and swings and bites you in the ass just like everything else, right? And to be clear, I'm not suggesting I support the Nazis. I detest racism and hatred and violence just like anybody else that has a heart and morals. The point is that as always, if you don't defend the worst of speech, you don't defend free speech. Same point on the other side. We're allowing the deterioration. We're allowing the actual destruction of this country in ways they frame the Democrats as doing. Yes. Don't forget, for people listening, I see it all as the same. This is just your government using two-tiered manipulations to drive you where they want.
100%, man, 100%. You mentioned earlier that Musk is just another oligarch. What do you think that he really represents within this administration?
It's multifaceted because it's interesting. I mean, clearly, it's hard to say whether look, it's hard to miss the Israeli influence, the Zionist influence. I mean, it's amazing that we even have to debate this because of what's funny is I guess it's not being debated. It's like you're racist if you point it out, but it's like it's not, I'm not even saying anything about Jewish people. It's amazing that you can see a political organization that is packed literally everybody in his cabinet to Trump himself screaming proud Zionist Israel supporters to where they're doing things at the expense of Americans for Israel on the record. And we can't see that, right? So my point is that it's hard to say whether Israel influence, as we can now wildly see to Elon, was like the impetus for this, or that just came as an after fact because he's pulled into this situation. But I mean, the point is he's always kind of been involved in this, very immersed, but now he's public. So it's kind of just hard to read it, right? The point is you can look back, and I made this point before, is, they keep going, Democrats are the deep state. Like just lazy, clumsy arguments. This half though, because it makes sense that the deep state would want to control the government, but only go after one part of it, because that's logical, right? It's just so stupid. But so the point is that where was I going with that? The point is, well, Elon Musk, ultimately going back a long way, that's what it was, that has been a contractor for the U.S. government, military contractor, U.S. government contractor for Biden. So explain to me how Biden is a pedophile deep state monster, which I think they're all fucking monsters. I forgot. No, cuss on here. Sorry. But the point, okay. But the point is that explain to me how Elon Musk contracting for Biden's administration doesn't make him part of the problem, right? It's just lazy nonsense. People don't want to look at this stuff. He contracted for the Biden administration, and then now he's contracting for the Trump administration, right? So if there's an obvious example of an unelected bureaucrat that seems to never lose power, it's somebody like that. That's what we call the deep state. But who knows if you want to look at it like that or if that's even the reality. The point is, he's been immersed in this for a very long time. I see him as sort of a front for a lot of things. I mean, people push back on this like it's some kind of a ridiculous thing, but it's just, to me, I'm not saying I can prove that he's not running companies, but if you're just objective about this, at the very least, he's not the one actually doing a lot of the stuff, but he's facilitating it. At the very least, that's not what he's claiming. I'm of the mind, though, that this is pretty much a front. You can look at how much he's involved in and nonstop tweets. I mean, either he's botting everything on Twitter, which I also very clearly think you can prove based on how often one word responses happen within 2 seconds of each other, rapidly. It's a bot response, in my opinion, raising up people that he want to raise up. I mean, this is supposed to be something they stop on this platform. We know they didn't because he hired CHEQ, an Israeli company that flooded the platform with bots. Easy to prove. But the point is that clearly, I think that he is not in charge of a lot of this stuff because I don't think he even has the potential time to do a lot of that. Catherine Austin Fitts makes the same argument. So you wonder what's really going on there. Like even XAI, for example. So DARPA had a program for explainable artificial intelligence, otherwise known as XAI, that ended in 2019. Months later, he bought Twitter, turned it into X, and then months after that, started XAI. Now, I think what we can now see is that XAI never ended, right? Because the point is you could already look back and see that XAI and Twitter were exchanging money, which I think is kind of illegal, and honestly, or at least a conflict of interest with what's all going on, because military contractor, military program, social media platform, something very weird about that. But then they sold to each other, or one, I guess, what was it, Twitter at XAI or vice versa. The point is, it doesn't matter. It's one company under Elon. And so it's weird to see. And what the point I'm making there is that Twitter, DARPA's program became now Twitter, or the artificial intelligence program that Twitter now is, essentially. I mean, that's really strange. And it's not strange when you stand back and look at how it's always gone. As Whitney's pointed out, total information awareness, just simply, we pushed back on it as Americans and it became Palantir. That's privatized. I mean, and now Palantir is one of the central pillars to all of this. Like, they've just been building this thing, and it's now very clearly developing, right? And so Elon Musk represents some kind of like a technocratic bridge, I think, to a lot of this. And I mean, or maybe he's a central player in regard to the kind of Israel globalist. Again, it's completely it's guessing. But what I do know is that they are central players in what's rolling out. I see Elon. Well, here's a better way to put it. This is what my opinion would be in regard to your direct question. I think Elon Musk is sort of the Pied Piper to get like these people out there that want to see him as some kind of cool tech bro, whatever they want to call him, to just kind of think that he's leading you into the future of what's better for Americans. When you look at it, it's like with Trump too. You look at his own history. It's like they're trolling you guys. They don't even believe the things they say they believe. You could read his books. He doesn't believe half the stuff that he says he believes today, or whether he's a Christian or a Republican. It's just wild to me. Like, don't they ask whether they're being cooed by the Democrats, seeing as how everybody in their main circle are Democrats or used to be? It's just so funny to me, and kind of making fun of him with that because I think they're all the same. But I think Elon's a Pied Piper to bring them to a certain place to where, they kind of willingly choose the subjugation that's coming in the technocratic prison. That's to a fine point. That's what I really think.
Speaking of technocratic prison, the real ID, digital IDs are back in the news and back in the public consciousness and seem to be rolling forward a little stronger than usual. The airlines are only allowing people with the real ID or passport to board planes. This is all building to the technocratic slave state that most people were deathly afraid of unfolding under the previous administration, but now it seems cool.
Yeah. Or the team sport screaming Republicans act like nothing's wrong when people, if you look into the comments of anything about this, left and right, people are like, what the hell? Are calling out Alex Jones. Like, wow, who are you? What happened? Why aren't we calling this out? Like, I'm serious. Like, it's everywhere, man. It's just, these are people that just don't have 100,000 followers. but they still don't get any voice and nobody highlights it. I do my best to highlight it. I try to show people these small comments that nobody's seeing. It's all over the place, But I'm sorry, what was
the
your
real
question
ID
again?
with the growing technocratic slave state.
Right. Well, what's interesting that they didn't care before. That's what I jumped on, because I do think that's important. But the real ID aspect of this is very clear, and it's weird the way that it's not being addressed properly. You know what I mean? It's the same, kind of the same point we were just making, to where this, let's be very, if you don't know, your audience, I'm sure probably knows, I'm sure you've informed them about this, but the idea is that this is a national identification scheme. This has been going on since 9/11, and well before that, quite frankly, and Patriot Act, so that's when it was introduced in earnest, at least to people that looked. It was there, right? So Real ID was going to be this idea about, we have to get away from the individual identifications and make it a national ID for your safety, right? Always. And even then, it was clear about the digital aspect of that. Like, that was the goal, to get it to be a digital aspect, but that was a little bit before its time. And so then they kicked the can down the road. Every single administration, the deadline was supposed to be like the next year. And so they kept kicking it down. Biden did the same thing, and then Trump did the same thing. Or rather, Trump did the same thing, then Biden did the same thing, and now Trump's in power, and now he's rolling it out. So what's important to me is the first president to actually turn it into something that now is going to be real was Trump. Now, ask yourself why that makes sense. With everything we've talked about. Now, everyone always wants to give him the benefit of the doubt and say, oh, maybe it's just maybe you can't, maybe it's going to work out for us. Or, oh, it's just an ID, stop complaining. Like, to your point, the same people that 30 seconds ago were hair on fire about the same thing because Biden was doing it, it's just an ID. But the obvious point here is that this is rolling out, and it is part of the same agenda. And now we're at a point to where it will actually become the digital aspect. Because right now, the SAVE Act and the Real ID part of it, Real ID compliant identification, that is very clearly on their own documentation a stepping stone for the digital ID part of this. Like, that's what that creates. And so eventually when they then pull that rug, you already have your digital ID presence because of this Real ID overlap. Massey was making a point about this. And so, but they also have the mobile driver's license side of it that the Democrats are rolling out, which is one aspect of the SAVE Act kind of manipulation of the two-party illusion. But now, underneath all of this, as I don't think the Senate's passed it yet, the SAVE Act, but I feel like it will, is that now you have the overlap to where for a while now, but now it's getting rapidly done, passports, birth certificates, they're rushing to make those digitized. So people are going, oh, you got your passports, oh, you got your birth certificates, what you do. And it does say that on there. But my point keeps being that this is just a means to an end. It's a one-step incremental thing. And now, while this is happening and they're getting you to think that you have other options, either before it even happens or right afterward, they're already pushing, and they have been for a long time, to make sure that your paper versions of everything else are simply no longer valid. And I'm like waving both those things at everybody at the same time, and it just seems like they can't connect the dots, I do want to point one thing out, though. May 7th is the day, the deadline, they say, to have it. So I don't believe even as of right now that I don't think any of it's effective at a point to where you can't fly or anything like that. May 7th is when that's supposed to happen forward. But my point, and I could be wrong on that. I think you're right. That's the reality. But what I think is important is that May 7th forward, Kristi Noem, for example, and the rest of them are like, you can't, like you're saying, you can't fly, you even domestically, by the way. And I was saying the same because that's what they were putting forward. But the more I looked into it, and Catherine shared this with me, there's basically a breakdown of like a PDF of the different things. There's 15 different other things you could use. So at least on their paperwork. So explain why they would come out and be like, you can't fly after May 7th. If on their own stuff, it says that there's 7. So it's either that they're trying to trick you into thinking you have to get it, which is kind of like the COVID shots, as well as going like, hurry up, it's so busy, everyone's getting it. And you look and it's like 20% of people have gotten it and no one's there. It's like, it's the same game. They're trying to get you to feel like you got to hurry. But what's interesting, though, and this is my other worry, maybe that is what's going to happen, right? Is that so maybe that after May 7th, there's going to be some kind of conglomeration, or I have a better word for it, like where all things come together, and all of a sudden they just pull those rugs at the same time, and they go, or a major event of some kind, a shooting or whatever, and they go, oh, well, now we have to do it. So I get the sense that they're kind of priming you to be ready for that. But it's interesting. So May 7th forward, we'll have to wait and see what happens. If they just keep going like normal, the point would be they lied to us, because you can still fly with all of the other things most people fly with, at least internationally, passports and so on. Domestically, though, I wonder if they're going to even start accepting passports. You can arguably use your passport for any travel, right? At least as I understand it. But I wonder if that's going to be removed as well. But let's also not forget that passports already have little If you've gotten one recently, they already have little tracker things on them for the most part. So it's all kind of like just corralling you into the acceptable things. And then one by one, these things get knocked off. You know what I mean? And as long as they give you the one last thing, like we'll probably get to a point to where the people that want to support it are going to be saying, you know, well, but you still have your one thing, you know, the one thing that's left. You still got that though. Like, stop complaining, you know, even though we've been watching them knock them down, you know, and that's how it goes. But to really quickly to bring it to the bigger picture, the real ID aspect, the digital ID aspect is just one major stepping stone in what they have been drooling about forever. And I mean, not our theories, not some opinion, what they've been writing about. You know what I mean? And not even in a way that's like all for your benefit. Like, if you read these documents, it's wild what they present as like, what's the interest? Like, that's my point from before, is that they put national security and their ability to kill and control whoever they want as like, that's what makes you happy and safe. I don't think any American actually thinks that, not many. And so that's really what they're driving for. And once we get in this position, I think that's one of the nails in the coffin of putting us in a position where, you know, I mean, right now, if they're threatening Americans overseas, you know, or just disappearing people, like, this is the similar conversation digitally, but also in the real world, to where they can just turn you off, right? Your identification doesn't work. They just did this to immigrants, both illegal and people who were here legally, by the way, who were given basically authority to be here by Biden. And my point was, like, I don't agree with that either. I think that what they did, by the way, just like Trump's about to do for random people illegally working on a farm, that he just goes, well, those ones are okay because, or hotels, which I don't know if you saw, he made that point that those ones are okay, which just seems like it doesn't make any sense. If you've got a legal person who has a PhD who just said something about Israel, you're like, get them out of here. But people who are actually here illegally working on farms are okay because we like them. You know, the point is, you can't just wave your hand and be like, they're good now. Or I even argue, like, from a president's perspective, oh, you're pardoned. You know, it just seems, I don't agree with that. So when he calls out Biden for doing that for these people, even though I can also prove that plenty of them were actually running from political persecution or what our governments were doing overseas, they gave them asylum in some cases, right? And then they gave them social security numbers. And so I'm not saying you have to agree with that. I don't, in fact. The point is that it was what happened. And if we're going to apply it equally, then a president clearly has that power. Trump's doing it right now, even with the Afrikaners from South Africa. Come on, we'll give you citizenship, right? So the point is that they went and put those people's names and numbers on a death list, not telling anybody. So these people have been here for 10 years, have families and jobs, bank accounts, and they go up to the bank and their bank's gone, their money's gone. They're like, what's going on? They say, oh, you're dead. That's really happened. You know, so if you don't understand how alarming that is, and in principle, that it is exactly like doing it to you, we are watching the stepping stones get built. And so you combine that with the digital ID point, social credit, you know, where we're being condensed into, it's very close. I mean, he's floated it 5 times that you're next. I listen, guys, when people tell you who they are, pay attention is the point, you know? So I just see that really coming together. Sorry, that wasn't a short edition.
Man, so. This is great. Something else along those lines is, if you step back and look at all the agendas associated with vaccines and COVID and everything that happened after 2020, if you do enough research, it seems like there is a very organized attempt to alter humanity, to fundamentally alter what we are as humans. And we were led to believe that this current administration isn't down with that, and the vaccines aren't going to be a part of everything, and things will be different now. But like everything else we were discussing, the same train keeps rolling forward. There is a widespread agenda amongst these elites and these technocrats that we are headed towards this age where they want to biologically merge us with technology in some ways. And this has been an ongoing thing, but now we've got RFK flip-flopping on the vaccine shit. So we're in the same situation, except it's rolling forward even stronger.
Yep. Yeah. Well, I mean, they're 2 different conversations, but they definitely overlap. But for me to frame them as 2 different conversations, what, you know, on just the health side, you know, he has, I often mix these. So to be clear, what I was saying earlier is MMR vaccine is the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine, which is something he's been fighting forever. I mean, it causes autism. It hurts people. And this is what science has shown. This is what the Vax documentary is about. This is what, you know, Del Bigtree and Andrew Wakefield, Arca Jr., Brian Hooker, these are people that have been screaming about this forever, and now suddenly it's just like safe and effective. It doesn't make any sense. Not a new one, same old shot that we know is dangerous. Even CHD called this out. Del Bigtree called it out and said that's not true. You know, it's wild. A lot of them give a pass. saying like, I don't understand, or I think he's being blackmailed. Probably. Who knows? I'm not going to say that unless I can prove it. But so that's crazy to me. And so then on top of that, we have the mRNA injection dynamic. You have Trump rolling out Stargate program, which is some, horrifying horror show of like, AI technology. It's just this terrifying thing they're doing. And the reality is, it's an mRNA platform for cancer, but really it means for whatever they want to make it for. And that's exactly what we were all fighting, and them included, right? So that is obviously happening. And then they immediately continued. It was January 17th, Biden's administration rolled forward the funding, hadn't do it yet, but started the process of funding a Moderna shot for bird flu. I don't believe it was mRNA, but it's clearly the same conversation, bird flu conversation, something RFK was just calling out, right? And January 20th, he gets inaugurated. I called this out and I said, this is happening. I don't see any indication that they stopped doing this. And you get yelled at by all the blind supporters that just assume whatever makes it look good, and then it comes to pass. And I said, see, they're still funding it. Oh, well, they had to because Biden did. Hey, they're just following along with, so now they're just well, Biden said, so they're going to follow along. Like that logic doesn't apply anywhere else you say it does. But then we saw it continue even more. Then they conditionally approved a shot for bird flu for humans. All right, an mRNA shot for it. That's now happening. And so I'm just going, guys, are we not paying attention? Like this doesn't make any sense. Now, just recently, this was yesterday, the day before, they just they fast tracked a self-amplifying mRNA shot for bird flu. And it's just like, guys, this is literally everything. This is the same thing. If you think Fauci and the rest and Gates this is the same thing. They're doing the exact same thing. And I don't know why people aren't calling that out. But to my point, I think most of them are. I just don't think we see them because they don't have 100,000 follower accounts. They're not, on the TV, but they're out there. And I think it's the majority. I really do. And so then to the technocratic part of this, we need to really understand this is where you lose people because one, they're afraid of this, and I get it. But two, it's like, like you ever read Boy's Life when you were growing up, those little magazines? On the back of them, they'd have like, oh, look, it's like a flying car or something. Remember that? And like, it's just like you look at that and go, wow, it's, in the future or whatever, like talk about these futuristic things. And the point is you talk about some of this stuff today. Nanotechnology, for example, and or any number of other things. And people look at it like it's some kind of a distant thing. It's like they have been using things. I can prove to people that smart dust was a real actionable in the environment used tool over 10 years ago. Well more than that, but I'm just trying to be very objective. And so this is insane to me. We're talking about nanotechnology, smart dust level stuff. I could literally pull up a clip if you think that's relevant, but it's stuff that goes back from a long way. DARPA has been working on this for a long time. And so the reality is that we know, as a matter of fact, they use lipid nanoparticles. Now, that's not the same thing necessarily. That's just nano-sized lipid particles. That's what we claim anyway. And of course, we get into that in regard to the modified RNA that's used in the N1-methyl pseudouridine modified RNA, which is dangerous to people, which is why it's hurting them in one part, or the lipid nanoparticles. My point, though, is that there's turned out to be evidence, across the board at this point, no one's talking about it in the corporate media, of evidence of contaminants. And there's people that have gone much further and argued that it's all sorts of things. Now, I'll leave that there if people want to research more, because there's intelligent people that I think know what they're talking about that I don't think are dishonest, that have different arguments, And at the end of the day, the main one that makes sense to me is that it's multifaceted, that there's been different batches with different things, and it seems like an experiment, right? The point is, even Japan found like black metal and different things inside them. That's from the process. I'm like, you're telling me that black metal ended up inside these things and, that's just the manufacturing process? Maybe we're not doing our jobs. It's like, that's insane to me. I think it's much more than that. So my point I'm getting at is that we're at a point today where we have things like ferritin nanoparticle injections they've worked on for a decade, that they proved. The Rockefeller Institute, Guardian wrote about this, called it the Magneto shot, where they could quite literally control mice. Period. Not a joke. They can literally control what mice do using optogenetics, magnogenetics, because of a shot that basically controls the natural ferritin particles in your body or adds to it. They're iron particles, right? And so you can see how that makes sense. And so that's a real thing, guys. And then you overlap that with things like James Giordano from the State Department have talked about for decades, which is neuroweapons, things that can literally control the way you think and feel. This is not a joke, And so these things, let's put it this way. They're presenting it as something they've proven they've done for a long time. I'll give you that it certainly could be some grand scheme to get us to think it's real. That's always possible, right? But so you combine that with the shots they gave everybody, all the weird counterintuitive things that people have been doing, acting against their own interests. But, politics is good at that too, right? But I think we're at a point now where we have not, whether we've already been shoved into it, we are now stepping over into the threshold of some very weird, like realize we were at the what they called the Internet of Things for a long time, which just means that your fridge is connected to the internet, right? Items are connected. Then we had talked about the Internet of Nano Things, right? Where it's the little, like basically nanotechnology, things, and that's been for decades or more. I can prove that. Where you have nanotech that can float in the air that can have connected to, internet connection, whatever else, Wi-Fi, or rather RFID, long-term kind of stuff, or and then long-term stuff. The point is that's been proven. I can show an old symposium where they're talking about this from a DARPA program, where they're saying that they have real-time communication, things that your own body, if it lands on your skin, your own body's motion and energy can power those things. Like, this is real stuff, and so that's the kind of stuff we're talking about. And that's a long time ago, and wondering whether these things have been used, but then for the point is then you go into the Internet of Nano Things, Internet of, what was it called? I'm conflating
Internet of Things.
Basically, the combination of those things. Well, no, the Internet of Things was that, then Internet of Bodies, and then Internet of Nano Things, but then they come together. It's the Internet of Nano Body, Nano Things, something like that. The bottom line is they've gotten to a point to where they're now showing, and this is, you look these things up. I wish I could pull that off the top of my head people could look it up. Internet, anyway, where you can, these things are in your body is the point. This is studied, where you have nanotechnology.
I've seen these studies.
DARPA's done this. They call in what they call them, living foundries, or they call it, damn it, I can forget all these terms, but it's a DARPA program where they have platforms in your bodies, right? So it's basically the mRNA platform, but in your body. Some people argue that's what they actually did, to where they can just prime your body through outside primer to produce the antigen you might need given day to day, So all this comes together in a point to where I think we might have already gotten there, or we're about to get there. And so the question is, are they willing to do that without you knowing? And I often point to plenty of studies they've done more than once that literally say, this is peer reviewed, that if we get to a point to where there's a moral imperative, right, for bio manipulation, essentially, that they argue that they should do it secretly because it's important. To make it very simple, it's a whole outlaid argument that if we're going to manipulate on the public for the interest of the country, and we're going to do it in a way that's about biomanipulation for the interest of the species, then we should do it without telling them because they wouldn't understand, is basically the argument. That's laid out in a scientific argument. And that was from, I think, 2018, and they've done more since. And so I think we're there, right? And I think that's happening. And so that's where the technocratic part comes together, and wondering whether our very actions and minds and thoughts are being manipulated. And if not, just ask whether they would be willing to do that with all the other stuff we're seeing laid out. And I'm not trying to scare anybody. Look it up for yourself.
I've heard about all of this stuff as well. Well, while we're in the realms of disturbing technology, what are your thoughts on the state of AI, where it's going, how it's already affecting people? I noticed even in my life it's affected it because of the echo chamber algorithms that we're subjected to. We're only being exposed to a small amount of people that their algorithms are deciding to show our stuff to, and it's not even about catering to what people want to see. It's about what the AI or algorithm believes we should be seeing. And that's the point where we're already at, it seems, and it's just getting worse. What are your thoughts on the state of that and how it's affecting the independent media?
Yeah. Just by the way, I remembered, it's Internet of Bio Nano Things. There's people can look it up, right? It's very important. That's where I think we're beyond that too. But so AI is obviously a part of this, right? Because we have to realize that one thing is about just relaying information. And that's something that Dr. Charles Lieber, who's clearly connected to the whole COVID-19 scandal conversation, he was the leading nanotechnology expert in the world before he kind of got whisked away because that whole weird China overlap thing. It's very strange. And he's involved with COVID-19 stuff. Same with Robert Langer, who's the co-founder of Moderna. They work together on this whole nanotech thing. It's clear that that alone is about sort of relaying information and effectively trying to control outcomes, literally. But the point is that's not necessarily like artificial intelligence, right? So the layer you can add to this would be if you then have some kind of an algorithm or even like a sentient AI or general AI that's like dictating, controlling, anything. Like adding to I'm talking like that's where you combine the Internet of Bio Nano Things to where you have things in your body that can respond to outside stimuli technologically, and then wondering whether you can have some kind of a dictating algorithm that can kind of influence, nudge, control, or completely take over. And this is my point from before. It sounds ridiculous and crazy if you don't understand what they're actually trying to accomplish. And it's written as plain as day right in their studies. Of course, they want to frame it as something benign, like to see if they can do this to, go after terrorists or, whatever. It's always something like that, but it's very real. And DARPA's always the one in this stuff. And so the AI aspect on that part of it is clearly terrifying because it's not just about control, but it's also about the amalgamation of the collection of just so much data to where, I mean, you have to realize that right now, and also studies written on this, the government has enough information on us to basically predict what we'll do to a very high percentile. I mean, everybody, literally anybody that's existed within the kind of digital ecosphere with your phones and online social media, it's quite alarming. Like, look up digital twins, for example. That's a good way to start, because right now what they do is they have these programs where they'll have like a SimCity kind of a version for things. And I'm of the mind that it's for probably the world, if not the country, but who knows? But my point is, there are examples of this that are on a smaller scale. It's like to test something. But I'm of the mind that why wouldn't they have this in an active sense from DARPA for like the whole country? And what that is they have like a SimCity kind of a experiment where you exist as like a avatar, right? And that every moment, what we're saying right now, right? My thought on this, what I said I did yesterday, it's all being cataloged and included to influence the input to what that avatar does. Right. And so that, and it's like a SimCity. It wanders around and it lives out Ryan Christian's life, right? And does the show, whatever else. And so every time we add more information, it gets a little bit more specific and a little bit better at being able to predict what you'll do next month on Tuesday at 3 p.m. You know what I mean? Like, that's the kind of level that they're at. And if you really stand back and look at how much information is being collected, it's like, they argue at the very least, and this is why I always point out, maybe they're trying to just lie to us so we believe that, but that it's like an alarming level. There's different arguments of how lie, but like to the point to where they can usually predict what you'll do in certain circumstances if you've shown them over the years what you've been doing. And so that's a terrifying thing. So now you overlap that with what they've already been able to kind of scrape or take with what Elon's doing. Using artificial intelligence, and this is not, as much as this gets very little talk and conversation, it's been publicly reported they're using artificial intelligence little bots for like the General Services the GSA. And, we're talking a lot of money, a lot of information, more than anything, really. And so what they're doing is having access, and they've been forced to admit this, to basically the gold mine of data. Because if you scrape, like, I can go online and lie about what I did yesterday, right? And half the time they're scraping these things, they don't really know how to discern whether that's the truth or not, unless they can check your GPS, which they can too. But the point is, there's information on there that they can't really reconcile sometimes. When you have data from the government, it's usually cross-checked. It's information about what you did, and they can prove that, but also what you did, what you wanted, what you decided, what you did, and what happened afterward. Like some of the most like information that will basically be the cherry on the top to whether these algorithms can truly dictate, rule, decide what you'll do on Monday next week, that kind of thing. And that's happening, guys. And they're scraping information, $6 trillion systems to know what you spent, what you did, what you think, what you typed, everything. And I mean, that is so alarming to me. I don't know why anybody's not afraid of that. But then, you could go a lot of different directions on what we think AI itself is going to do. And the obvious point is didn't even Elon Musk tell us that it's going to destroy the world? That's like that AI is like going to kill us all, but we need my good AI to do the right thing. It's like, we all seem to sense there's a problem there. I just don't know why we're rushing headlong into this. It's wild to me.
It is wild. I know you've only got an hour. We've got a few minutes left. Maybe we could offer some solutions. We know how the collective ideological solutions work out for everybody. It seems that individual-based solutions and objectives seem to have the best effect on society, but there's many ways we could approach it. What are your thoughts?
Again, to the earlier thing, first and foremost, I just think that, we got to stop being swayed by even people that you might think are honest, by people that are trying to convince you that you should do something other than what you believe is right? Or what your principles, your integrity. Like, even if, like, before the election process, there's a lot of us that were calling out literally everything happening right now before it happened, saying, this is what we see coming. Oh, you're black-pilled. It's an impossible purity test, And the point was, I'm not even trying to tell you have to think like me. Vote whoever you want to vote for, what you believe in, but just consider what we're saying, and just got shouted down. And so the point is, people were being convinced that, those guys are just black-pilled. That's not what adults do, right? We're the adults in the room. You sometimes have to make hard choices, right? Sometimes you have to compromise. Even those are the same people that were screaming other different things right before they got you into the false binary of the last two people, And so at the end of the day, it's insane to me that we ever took it as logic to say that you shouldn't do what you believe, right? The whole argument is that your vote always matters until you're about to vote for the wrong person. Then you're wasting it if you do it for the wrong person. It's so funny how that works. So err on the side of your principles in every possible thing, right? And then if you do that, you'll begin to see people show themselves, right? People will reveal themselves to you by trying to basically hate you for choosing what you actually stand for. I, no matter what I believe, would never look down on somebody or hate somebody for choosing what they truly believe is right. I'll straight up tell you I think you're wrong. I'll say I think you're being played by this monster. But if you show me and you tell me at the very least that you really believe in it, I say, okay, fair enough. Do what you believe in. I mean, I think that's the most important thing. And that may lead to people doing the wrong thing in my mind, but I'm okay with it as long as they really believe what they're doing. I think most people have been tricked into doing something they don't. But so in a bigger sense than that, I think the actions in your life obviously reverberate, and it matters. Small things you do, right? Doing good things for people in the smallest ways do trickle through the community. And I think it's important to live that way in a small way every day and stop looking to the bigger picture and thinking that, look, there's a lot of bad things happening in the world, clearly. But like with COVID, you look out your window when you wake up, you might not have ever known that was going on if you didn't get tapped into this fear-mongering, paranoia machine that's constantly trying to get you to be tapped into this thing and like always your cortisol levels at a peak all day, every day. So, that's what they really want from you, and so that's first point, I think, is just to, every day be a little bit better than we were yesterday. That's something I live by, right? Just be a little bit better than you were yesterday. So, that's important to always think about. But then when it comes to like politically, for that matter, like, I think Derek Burrows is a good person to look to for this stuff. And I think the important thing is to recognize that you are the person that can make change in your life. Nobody else. Nobody you vote for, not your neighbor, you, and the actions you make in your life. And that maybe you believe that voting is the best thing you can do, give it a shot. But if it continues to really show no change in your life, then recognize that maybe that's not the only thing that should matter. And quite frankly, even if it does matter, it's the least politically active thing you can do. Let me say that again. Voting is the least politically active thing you can do. You may have been taught that by checking that box that you're the one dictating the future. The reality is you've been played into thinking that's the only thing you need to do. And I can quite literally prove to you, as we seem to always be able to notice when the other side's doing it, right, that they stole it, or China or Russia, whatever it is, recognize that the system doesn't allow that to translate to the outcome. I mean, we know this, guys. Clint Curtis testified to this, that he was paid to manipulate machines, and they used the same machines the next election, or they all seem to point to the machines being broken, and yet we still keep using them. Even Trump apparently is now going to be floating forward using mail-in ballots, and Trump, he just wrote this stuff out. I'm going, how does that even align with what you guys are being told? They're just always trying to get you to keep going, So err on that side. But at the end of the day, I think it's about the actions you do outside of that. Voting with your dollar, for example. Go out there and show people that, invest in the products that you believe in. Boycott things that you don't think align with your values. That's important. But I think the main thing is to pull yourself out of the system. And that doesn't always mean go move in the woods somewhere. That's what they always try to pretend that's the only thing Derek's talking about. It's not, It's about trying to pull yourself out of this system. Find alternative methods, platforms, peer-to-peer exchange, right? The free exchange of free individuals is the only thing we should be fighting for, quite frankly, and make sure that we're not being hindered by some kind of power structure arguing this or that has to change because of that evil person over there. It's like it just never stops. That, I think, is the most important thing, is to show the system that you're not bound to it, pull out of it, recognize that if you don't give up that, consent, that ultimately the system can't continue, and I believe that. I know people disagree, but I think there's a possibility for our future where we don't even have to have government in our lives at all. I think government is the problem, but that's usually a step too far for most people, but I'm happy to talk about it in other podcasts, but that's what I ultimately think. So really just trust your heart. Stop listening to other people. There's a lot of good people out there that I think are just played by the partisanship to think that they're doing the right thing. But if you just continue to pay attention, not to the narratives, to what they're actually doing in the outcome, you'll quickly recognize that your values don't align.
Right on. That's a great note to end on. Ryan, thank you so much. We'll definitely do this again in the future. And until next time, everyone, have an excellent evening. We'll talk again tomorrow. See y'all then. The Forbidden documentary, Doors of Perception, is available now for rent or purchase from our Vimeo site, listed in the description below. The nature of this experience seems to always be just beyond the reach of our science, technology, and consciousness collective.
There's layers upon layers upon layers.
It does add such an element of mystery to this place.
Why are we here?
We're getting closer to the truth now.
There's too many people experiencing profound interactions with conscious entities.
I'm focused on the non-human intelligence contact phenomenon in dreams. Dreams involve interactions with real entities.
People are waking up paralyzed. They're sensing or seeing something very evil in the room.
I have experienced sleep paralysis. Shadow people start to appear.
I was taken from my earliest memories by non-human alien entities. More and more people are wanting to talk about these things.
A ufologist would say, well, that's obviously an extraterrestrial. And a paranormal researcher would say, well, that's a ghost. Well, what if it's all of those things and none of those things? The entities, the intelligence that were just beyond our understanding.
There seems to be something a little extra that can take forms of anything.
I can't believe what I've seen, but it continues on a daily basis. We're definitely not alone. UFOs, UAPs, portals opening up.
I live with all this supernatural stuff. You kind of grow up with that around here. You see a lot of strange things. I don't like to talk about skinwalkers too much.
I had an experience with a skinwalker entity.
People, they would say they would transform into bears, into wolves. There's these bad things that occur. Ghosts, UFOs, and all types of things coming from somewhere.
Our beliefs, our emotions, and our fears all seem to heavily influence the nature of these experiences.
There is so much more that we just don't have time for in this busy, loud, noisy life that we lead.
All of this is planned. Everything is synchronicity.
There's so much more out there. We really are picking up such a small percentage of the electromagnetic spectrum.
The world is an amazing place.
It feels like we're gods in training.